Okay, so hopefully you watched the video about histograms because today we're going to be talking about another visual representation of data, one which can help us determine the shape and see where most of the data lies. Today is the hilariously named box and whisker plot. I have some whiskers. They're facial hair. That's what whiskers are. Boxes are little square things. They look like this. Kind of. All right, so here's the theory of what it is. A box and whisker plot is going to look like this. And what it's going to tell us is it's going to tell us how the data is spread out. Because in each one of these four little sections is going to be exactly 25% of the data. 25% here, 25% here, 25% here. And if we know that exactly 25% of the data lives exactly from here to here, that tells us what about this upper part of the data? Well, it tells us it's very spread out. But what do we know about this kind of middle low part of the data? It's very condensed. So here's how we're going to make the box and whisker plot. We need to do what's called a 5-number summary. The 5-number summary divides the box and whiskers into its 4 sections. So the minimum is literally the minimum value. This guy is the minimum, the very smallest value. This very middle number, let's think about what that would be. Well, if 50% of the data lies in this first 2 sections, don't we need that to be the exact middle value? And what's the exact middle value? Well, it's the median. So this middle value in the box and whiskers is the median. Obviously, this highest point is the max. And then we have 2 other little dividing sections that are called Q1 and Q3. Q1 and Q3 are interesting. They're kind of like the median of the first half of the data. And so basically what it is it's saying, hey, within the first 50% of the data, what's the exact middle value? It's like the median within the median. Same with Q3, but for the upper half. Q3 is like the median of the second half of the data, or the median of the upper half of the data. We look at only the top 50%, and we pick the exact middle value. Now, I could have you do this by hand, but actually there are kind of differing techniques on how to determine Q1 and Q3 if you look them up online. Thankfully, our calculator does tell us its version of Q1 and Q3, so we're just going to use the calculator. Now, I will get into IQR and outliers at some point later, probably in this video if we have time, but maybe a separate video as well, and we'll talk about how to deal with those. So first of all, let's look at box and whisker plots for the following groups of data, and then we'll talk about how to interpret them. We have random sample of 15 housing prices in my hometown, Shiremanstown, Pennsylvania, and the next town over where I went to school, Mechanicsburg. So each of these represents, like, this is probably an apartment in dollars. This is more like a mansion or whatever in dollars, a much bigger house. And all of these other data are like different individual houses. Now, in order to have our calculator help us with the box and whiskers, we obviously need to plug in the data. So if you go into Stat and Edit, you can see that I have all of the data entered in. This list 1 is the Shiremanstown data, and list 2 is the Mechanicsburg data. Now, in order to make the box and whisker, we need these 5 pieces of data, the 5-number summary. And the calculator will do that for us if we do one variable stat. So let's make the 5-number summary down here. We'll do it for Shiremanstown first. Remember, one variable stat, go over to calc. I wanted to do list 1, so let's hit list 1. It's the blue part of the 1 button. And here we go. Okay, now none of this stuff matters to me yet. I'm interested in the 5-number summary, which is at the bottom. So let me make my table a little bit nicer here. The minimum for Shiremanstown is 125K. Q1, remember, that's like the median of the first half of the data is 170K. The actual median is 215K, K meaning 1,000, of course. Q3 is like the median of the upper half of the data, and then the maximum is 800,000. Okay, so when our box and whisker plots are made, we kind of make them so that they float over a number line. And the cool thing about box and whiskers is that we can actually stack multiple ones over the same number line. So let's make my number line first. That's always the first step in making a box and whisker plot. I guess I need the very lowest to be somewhere around 100,000 because Mechanicsburg has 110,000. So I'll make this 100,000. And I think I'll count up by 100,000. So this will be 2, this will be 3, this will be 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, 9. And that's just about right because, as you can see, the biggest home for Mechanicsburg happens to be the $900,000 home. So on our Shiremanstown data, the minimum, this is really easy. We're going to represent with a dot. So here is about 125,000. Q1, 170 is right about here. This will be a line. The median is 215, right about here. Another line. Q3 is 260, right about here. And then the maximum is going to be 800,000. Now, let's make our little box here. And let's make our whiskers. And let's see what we can interpret about the data here. Remember, the whole point about stem and leaves is that 25% of the data lives in each section. So what can we tell about this? Well, the upper 25% is very, very, very spread out. In other words, if I'm trying to describe the shape of this, let's think about what kind of shape it would have. I have a clump over to the left, and I have some data trailing off in a spread out fashion to the right. This looks like a classic example of skew right. And that's actually true for a lot of houses. Most of the houses are kind of down in this affordable range, but you have a couple of very, very rich people that can buy very, very big houses. And so oftentimes, housing data in a town will be skew right. That's interesting. All right, now let's do the same thing for Mechanicsburg. I'm going to put Mechanicsburg in a nice maroon color if I can find it. That was the color of my school, maroon. We're here at GWA, blue and yellow, but Mechanicsburg High School was maroon and we called it steel. Get it? Because we were mechanics. Okay, anyway, the Mechanicsburg data. Let's do one variable stats again because we need the 5-number summary for Mechanicsburg. This time, though, I'm going to have it look at list 2. List 2 being the blue part of the 2 button. All right, so here's the Mechanicsburg data. The minimum, let's scroll down to get that, is 110K. I totally could have found that without using the chart, right? Q1, 180K. Median, 210K. Q3 is 550K. And then the max is 900K. So let's make a little stacked box and whisker action going on here. I'm just going to put them right over the same number line. Mechanicsburg's minimum is a little bit lower, but everything else in Mechanicsburg is a little bit higher. I guess its median is about the same. But look, its Q3 is way up at 550, and its max is way up at 900. So take a look at what's going on here. I would argue that this is still kind of a skew right situation. Like, we can definitely call this skew right. But if you notice, Mechanicsburg also has a very spread out kind of whatever we would call this, like the third quarter of it. And look at the way the housing data is spread out. In Shiremanstown, there are these 2 houses that maybe we could consider mansions. But Mechanicsburg, even though the first half of its data looks pretty similar, look at this. It has 5 houses that are all kind of up in the mansion status. And that shows on the graph. It's upper bit is also getting stretched. So even though it's skew right, we could say that there are more houses that are in kind of this mansion status. So here is our data. I think I'll call it quits for today. I'm going to make a second video in a couple seconds explaining these last two things, the IQR and the outliers. And for those of you that are wondering how to get outliers, stay tuned for the next video. But for now, here's your tutorial on Box and Whiskers. Thanks for watching.